All right, here we go with a quick update on Ammo Incorporated, symbol POWW, listed here on the NASDAQ. Stock closed $1.16, down 1 cent, less than 1% here on the day, recently hitting lows a couple of weeks back of $1.08 a share. And in my opinion, unfortunately, there's two ways to look at this, because the last time we checked it out was all the way back here, middle of June. And in my opinion, when we looked at the numbers, the fundamentals, the balance sheet of this business, we said that we could potentially have something that can run up and break out to the high twos, maybe even threes, if the company starts reporting growing revenue and beating earnings estimates more times than not. And unfortunately, we're getting the opposite of what we wanted, obviously. And the stock has dropped, about 30% from our last update, hitting lows again of $1.08. They recently got rid of the CFO. And now, of course, we're delinquent with the 10Q, delayed filing of the 10Q. Ammo said it is unable to file its quarterly report on time due to an ongoing internal investigation, which the company said in September was regarding its internal control over financial reporting for the fiscal years 2020 through 2023. Company said it was given until January 25th to submit a plan to regain compliance with the stock exchange. So obviously now that's something we have to keep an eye on. Of course, lately I'm noticing anytime a stock goes down, there's class action lawsuits and whatnot. So we have that going on also. But let's look at some recent news here. So Ammo ticked up after the election. Well, hold on. Let's go back here. Okay. All right. So basically what's going on here in my eyes is that we have a company that is healthy in the numbers. So best comparison would be something like Honest, which we just looked at recently. The numbers look good when we first found it. And anytime you have a company that could be viewed as fair or undervalued in the numbers, all you really need is positive consistency moving forward, and the stock should more than likely climb up and appreciate for you. And that's what we saw with Honest, right? We looked at the numbers at, $2.5, $4, $5. And that's why I was saying, in my opinion, we should, continue to rise and break up and break out. But what was the difference? You could make the argument that Honest was undervalued in the numbers, but the company was consistently beating earnings estimates and increasing guidance, right? So you're getting a lot of positive news and updates coming out from Honest, and it was potentially undervalued in the numbers, so it starts to surge, it starts to break up and out. Everyone wants a piece of Honest, right? On the flip side now, we're getting the opposite head of the coin with POW. And what we're seeing is we have a company that you could make the same argument that it's undervalued in the numbers, but the problem is the earnings have been inconsistent. So it seems like this is their best quarter here. And the company, we looked at it right after they posted these earnings, a couple of days after on the 17th. But we can see that they missed on the EPS side. They posted a cent a share, analysts expecting 1.5 cents, but the revenue came in nice. Over $40 million for the quarter, analysts expecting a touch below $38 million. So nice beat on the revenue side, missed on the EPS, margins took a hit, boom, stock drops. Okay, understandable. Then, of course, we had big volume come in mid-July when we had the attempt on Trump, and that helped pop firearm stocks like Swibby, Smith & Wesson, and, of course, POW. So a pop, as you see, running up to about 205. Stock drops down, retests the 20-day, has a little bounce, and then drops, breaks through it. We come into earnings now, first week of August, and we see the company now, again, flips the script, and they beat on the EPS side, but they miss on the revenue side by about $2.5 million. So now we have another mixed quarter. So the stock kind of flattens out here, but then eventually ends up breaking going into October. Then we bottom out, we make our double bottom, triple bottom, 108. We start to bounce, gain some momentum coming into earnings that came out roughly 4 weeks ago, November 8th. And we can see yet again, the company beats on the EPS side, but slightly misses on the revenue side. Now, in fairness to the company, this technically is a more narrow loss on revenue than they posted the quarter prior. But now you can kind of make again, almost similar to what we saw with GameStop, right? The GameStop argument. It's like, yeah, we kind of know that we're struggling and we're going to see drop offs in revenue and we're going to miss that estimate. But, if we keep losses in check, we can still, potentially keep beating on the EPS side. So we can kind of try to gloss over the fact that we're just not generating as much revenue as we're supposed to. So right now, unfortunately, I mean, you could make the argument it could go either way, but in general, I do understand why the stock has gone down, and it's just very frustrating because, again, in the numbers, in my opinion, it does look like it should be much, much higher. And it's just unfortunate that the company's been struggling with the revenue here. Ammo maintained neutral by Roth. I believe they're the only institution that's keeping an eye on this right now. Price target cut from $1.60 to $1.50. And I believe the quarter before they were still above $2. But we can see the CFO drops out at request of the board, apparently. So this is why, again, some people may have started to, raise flags of the whole situation. You're randomly getting rid of the CFO. What's going on? So now they, again, have some issues to deal with. But, of course, getting delisted off a major exchange would not benefit them in the slightest. And it's just a really unfortunate situation because I know last time I looked at it, we were in the election year. And you could have made the argument that regardless of who won, you could almost justify a surge in firearm and ammunition sales, right? If Harris happened to win, people might have felt just basically afraid in general that the S was going to hit the fan, so they would potentially stock up on firearms and ammunition. So you have that argument if Harris won. Then on the flip side, Trump happened to win, but at the time, if Trump won, you could make the argument, hey, listen, Republicans are, you could make the argument they're a little more favorable for the Second Amendment, so we might see some deregulation and, something like POW. I know they supply like law enforcement, so if we're going to restore law and order, and, I know Trump likes to beef up our military and have a strong military, so if he's going to potentially put in some orders and they're going to try to replace like a lot of the ammo and equipment that, we lost or we just left in the Middle East, whatever the heck happened there. But you understand my point. So that's why, like, you could have made the argument that regardless of who won, you could have had a potential buy here on your hands. And the problem is right now, in the moment, the company is reporting inconsistent revenue. And that's why it's not having the run and the breakout like Honest had. And this is why, even if you're going to buy something and just tuck it away for 2-3 years, this is why I always say you have to at least come back and check in on the company every month, every 3 months at minimum, and see how the earnings are, what the guidance looks like, how's their forecast moving forward. Right? And we can see gun stock surge after attempt. Higher odds of pro-gun Trump's election victory. Roth, you can see, right? It was 2.25, their price target. Then they lowered it to 2 back here mid-June. And now you see again, just a couple of months back, they recently lowered the price target again to about $1.50. And that is justified. That is justified, in my opinion. But wait, let's go back to earnings themselves. Investigated for securities fraud. Zach's talking about them potentially undervalued. They cite the low PE. So unfortunately, right now, they're dealing with a handful of issues. But it's just frustrating, again, when you find a company that technically looks good in the numbers, but they're just unable to deliver. Now, I know I was looking for an article. I couldn't find it. It might have been from 2 quarters ago when they reported earnings. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so this was, the quarter back in August. Decline in revenue attributed to a decrease in activity across both its ammunition and marketplace segments, influenced by the current macroeconomic environment. Gross profit margin of 31.6, down from 40.9 year prior. Company also recorded an adjusted EBITDA of $2 million, significant drop from $6.6 million in the previous year. Net loss for the quarter, $7.1 million, compared to a net loss of only $1.1 million in the same period last year. Diluted EPS, loss of 7 cents compared with a loss of 2 cents in the first quarter of last year. Gunbroker.com generated $12.3 million in revenue, with new user growth averaging approximately 25,000 per month. Average take rate increased to 6.2% from 5.8% in the first quarter. Ammunition, $18.7 million. However, the gross margin for the ammunition segment was negative at -4%, reflecting production inefficiencies and a shift in sales mix. Ammo Inc. is focusing on transforming its ammunition plant to higher margin rifle and pistol production. The company is also enhancing its marketplace by introducing innovative e-commerce solutions, such as the Gearfire financing solution and improved cross-selling capabilities. Additionally, Ammo Inc. repurchased approximately 580,000 shares of its common stock under its repurchase plan during the reported quarter. Also mentioned anticipated increase in non-firearm accessory sales and the expected improvement in production throughput and product marginality in future periods. Looking ahead, Ammo Inc. aims to streamline its manufacturing processes to improve product throughput and marginality. The company is also working on offering flexible financing options to gunbroker customers and enhancing its cross-selling solutions to drive sales growth. The company's strong financial position, with $134 million in current assets and $50.8 million in cash and cash equivalents, supports its ongoing transformation efforts. So we may have a situation here where we may still look technically healthy in the numbers, but we may still struggle for the next 1 to 2 quarters before finally bottoming out, having all of our ducks come, all of our stars align, and now we start to see the trickle up in revenue start to come in, and we actually start to surpass some of these estimates. Because again, technically in the numbers, this stock, even though the assets are dropping, liabilities ticked up, and book value per share is dropping, it's technically, in the numbers, you could say, is worth much more than where it's currently trading. Which is why, in my opinion, if the company happens to beat next quarter's earnings, you can probably instantly see a pop back up to the high ones, if not $2. If they're able to string back-to-back beats, in my opinion, it goes back to $2.50. So it's really unfortunate because it's really all up to the company right now. It's all up to the business. And again, I will say, I know the revenue has been slipping a little bit for the last couple of quarters, but again, they provide a little bit to the military, a little bit to law enforcement. So that's why now, with Trump coming in, again, he gets sworn in, I believe it's like the 3rd week of January. So once he gets sworn in, if we start to see any deregulation, or of course, if we start to get news announcements of how, orders are coming in for, law enforcement, because we're going to restore law and order, and he's going to, who knows, we're going to put orders in for whatever, border patrol, military, because again, as strong as our military is, we know that Trump obviously likes to have a strong military. So again, the fact that, equipment was lost, left behind, whatever the situation was. But also, yet again, see, it's interesting because I know, again, you have the whole Doge situation with Elon and Vivek. So now if they're going to cut spending, you may see a drop across the board. Defense companies, firearm companies, ammo companies, you may just see a massive drop across the board. So unfortunately, this one right now is up in the air. And it's rough because, again, in the numbers, in my opinion, I do like it. I do like it. We have positive equity here, about 350 million. Book value's 293. We have cash outweighing debt. We have assets outweighing liabilities, both the short and the long term. If we subtract this 14.5 million debt from this 50 plus million cash, we're left with about 35, 36 million. Added to our equity would be what, 370, like 375 million in change. And then if we come down here, even if we look at last year's dropping numbers, you can see revenue 145 million. They lost 15.5 million, so that's positive 130 million. So in my opinion, I personally put quote unquote fair value of this business at roughly 500 million. And you can see the market cap's 138 million. So if you look at it that way, yeah, you can say, oh, well, in the numbers, I could be buying a $3 stock for $1 right now. And in my opinion, I would agree with you. But the problem is, if they consistently keep reporting dropping revenue and they miss earnings estimates more times than not, the stock is going to continue to drop or at least remain flat near lows until those numbers jump the fence and start to come in more positively. And we can see that obviously all of our return percentages dropped and went negative. The gross margin here is actually kind of middle of the road. I mean, not the lowest it's been at 14, not the highest it's been at 31, so it's 20. So that's what I mean. It's kind of middle of the road. The operating margin, though, fell off a cliff, as we see. Last quarter, minus 15%. This quarter, minus 31.33%. So that's what I mean. When you have margins dropping that low again after they were coming up, it's unfortunate, and that's why the quote-unquote fair value of the business can only keep the stock so high. And it just sucks, really, in general, that the stock is now down in the low ones, because we know if we break $1, what could potentially be coming. And if the company is not able to get the stock back above $1 organically, which usually comes from positive news announcements, new orders, earnings beats. Unfortunately, it seems like we don't really have any of that right now for Ammo Inc. So that's why if they do happen to miss earnings again, even though it might not make sense in the fundamentals, you could see Wall Street just short the crap out of the stock and force it down below $1, and then the company has to enact a reverse stock split, even though technically, fundamentally, they might not have had to. So it's just an unfortunate situation. The inventory turnover dropped down to the low 2s, not the lowest it's been, but obviously moving in the wrong direction. Asset turnover, how much revenue they're generating off of the assets on their balance sheet. Assets, were up and down. They're kind of holding that 400 million mark. But the revenue is dropping, so the asset turnover is going down. The debt hasn't moved much, so those ratios are kind of the same, and we can see EPS has been beating more times than not as of late, but of course revenue has now been missing lately. And moving forward, the company is just looking to maintain the $30 to $40 million range, and if we switch over annually, you can see we're expecting technically a drop in revenue year over year from 145 million last year down to 141.7 million for 2024. And then 2025, they're expecting a tick back up to 152.5 million. So if they do, quote unquote, transform these facilities and they start obviously pumping out higher margin products that helps them out, then potentially we can see the tick back up in revenue and of course in profitability in 2025, but that remains to be seen. But yeah, it's just an unfortunate situation because it seemed like it quieted down even back here when we were looking at it, right? We were kind of just like we had this gap down and we were kind of like watching this whole kind of sideways channel that it was in for a while. And we had a couple of breakups and out, right? Kind of retesting those high 2s, getting near that top trend line of our channel, and then we just had Mixed report, so we drop. Mixed report, so we drop. Mixed report, so we stay down. You know? And again, before that, nice beat, top and bottom line, and then we missed top and bottom line. Right? And again, mixed report. Mixed report, right? Estimates jumped up to 54 million. So this right here, a situation like that, to take the next milestone up from the 40s to the 50s, if they would have came in even close or beat that estimate, the stock would have exploded, in my opinion. But it's just unfortunate because, again, you could make the argument in theory that they could maybe get a bump now over the next year or two, depending on what Trump actually does. But also at the same time, they're struggling. They're struggling in the numbers. And you can see, I drew this out. This is going back from the lows of the end of May of 2019, just kind of cutting across, connecting to that next bottom. And you can see that if we do happen to break and drop down, you can see we're looking at like 82 cents, which is why I'm saying if we are going to potentially continue to struggle for the next 1 to 2 quarters and be mixed, then we are probably going to drop the stock down into the 80-cent range. Because since we had the big run-up here in 2020 and 2021, hitting the highs of roughly 10.5, we've just been in a dropping trumpet since then. And it's just an unfortunate situation. Switching over to stock charts real quick. We can see that the MACD recently crossed to the downside. That's kind of aiding in this sell-off here. RSI 42.6, but again, it doesn't really move that much as well, so I don't even know how many traders would jump into something like this with an RSI down at 30 or bet against it with an RSI up at 70. We can see it's been rejecting the 50-day moving average consistently. This was, it looks like, the longest time before this. So you'd have to go all the way back to April, the last time the stock was kind of strongly above the 50-day moving average. Since then, it's been obviously dropping below it, testing it, trying to get back above, and then rejecting off of these little pops here. And you can see rejection here in September. Again, tail end of September, all throughout November. Look at the multiple rejections because they don't have the earnings to back it up. And again, that's why comparing it to something like an Honest, you're seeing the exact opposite situation taking place with Honest, with POW, because we had two companies that were technically undervalued in the numbers. However, one's delivering on the earnings side and one is disappointing. So you see now what happens. RSI on the weekly down here a touch over 35, and you can see we hit like that 30 mark and we had the little bump going into earnings and the elections, and now we're kind of curling back down. Looks like the MACD recently crossed to the upside on that election news and is now potentially getting ready to flatten and cross back to the downside now with some profit taking. So, in my opinion, bottom Bollinger Band, $1. Obviously, we have to retest that 108 level in my eyes. But then if we break to $1, in my opinion, I wouldn't be too surprised. But again, it's going to be a gamble. And of course, every stock that you buy is essentially a gamble. But this one is really going to be a gamble because, in my opinion, again, if the stock goes lower, would I be surprised? No. Also, at the same time, as we roll into the new year, Trump gets sworn in. If, as I said, all of a sudden you start to get headlines about beefing up law enforcement, restoring law and order, orders coming in for the military and whatnot, then you may see the resurgence into something like POW. But I don't know. Again, because what I'm worried about the most is a reverse stock split. And everyone watching this knows that. Right? We had how many people comment on the laser video, Luminar Technologies, LAZR, after the reverse split? I had tens of thousands of shares. I had thousands of shares. Now I got like 10 shares. And usually after a reverse stock split happens, the stock drops even more. So, based off this delinquency with the NASDAQ, in my opinion, they're probably going to be able to file their 10Q before the January 25th deadline, in my opinion. So again, we may continue to drop, but then we'll pop technically off that news, but then we have earnings middle of February. And again, 36.6 million in revenue. I mean, you'd have to go back to their best quarter, and even before that, they didn't. You can see, look, it's just that one big quarter, and then you'd have to go all the way back again to early 23 before the last time they posted above 36 million. And that's what the estimates are for next quarter. So they need some sort of positive announcement. And again, supposedly, you know, transforming and their production and going into rifles and higher margin products. You know, I understand. But my biggest concern is that anyone who may have wanted to buy a new firearm and ammunition for it already has it now. And again, we had the massive surge in revenue coming out of the lockdowns, and then we just kind of been dropping. And these are significant drops. Again, this is essentially 50 million in revenue drops year over year. And now we're looking to close out 24 at about 141 million. It's just a hard one to call, in my opinion, because I do like it in the numbers, and that's why, even if they beat it up and bring it down to like 90 cents and change, and then we turn around and all of a sudden some, you know, activist takes a position in the company, or someone puts in a big order, or again, Trump says something massive, and then all of a sudden the stock surges back up to 2, 3 and change. You know, in my eyes, I can see that happening. But the problem is they're not currently delivering on the revenue. The stock is now down in the low ones, and I just want to put out the potential warning for a potential reverse stock split that could be coming down the road. So if you understand the risks involved, you're able to play this for the long term, or you feel that something is going to happen that is going to be positive for Ammo Inc., then I can understand if you want to, you know, take a position down here or average down here at these levels and hold on for the long term. But it seems like the next couple of quarters may remain rough, and then potentially, like the second half of 25 going into 26, maybe that's when we start to see, again, you know, revenue come in above estimates and the stock regains life, and, you know, everyone piles in here at the bottom, and we start to see a nice surge back into the twos. So it's unfortunate, but, you know, only time will tell what's going to happen. But let's look at the pivot points real quick. Yeah, I don't like being wrong, but again, we have to control the controllables, right? And unfortunately, what they report earnings-wise is out of our control. And again, it's just unfortunate. They've been just slightly missing the mark. And if they were just able to report in line, or of course even slightly beat that mark, I mean, you know, the stock would probably be back up here, in my opinion. So it's just an unfortunate missed opportunity, if you will. But again, we know they don't all work out, right? I mean, if you could just throw a dart at the board, buy a stock, and it would always work out, I mean, you know, if it was easy, everyone would do it. If it was easy, we'd all be retired millionaires by the time we're, you know, 27. It is what it is, right? So we have to work with what we have. But again, it's just unfortunate that the earnings kind of came in mixed. But looking at the pivot points here, you can see $1.40 was a key level. We tried to bounce off of it, and of course recently broke down below it. We just had another mixed report. So, I mean, we could even have like an upward channel and try to retest. But then technically, if we have an upward stepping channel, that's technically bearish, and then we should break down. So that's why kind of potentially any way you look at it, you might see the stock retest the lows and potentially make new lows. Switching here to the daily, you can see, okay, 122 we just rejected off of, almost lining up with our 50-day moving average, which we've been rejecting off of for months. And now the next support level, $1.10. And again, that previous low was $1.08. $8 level right there. So you can see a potential rejection coming off of this 20-day, and then you're going to run into, again, like, the pivot point, this fib level, the trend line, the fib level, and then we got 113 here, another fib level, another trend line. That's why I do think it's going to drop down. So, again, it's one I like in the numbers, but if you understand the risks involved, but you also have confidence in the sector or the business over the next year or two, then it could be worth taking a shot. But technically, you guys know I'm transparent, and of course, technically, even though we liked it in the numbers over here at $1.70, I mean, this is technically the last time we looked at it, and it's down huge. So that's the update on Ammo Inc. And unfortunately, of course, until we actually see what the new administration will implement, it may be hard to tell what the outcome of POWW would be. But that's just my slant on it. But that's pretty much it. I'll end it there. So once again, this is Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they're very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.